Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of One Vision, the FinTech Fuse. This is Theo, your host for the episode. Joining us today is Bryce Nobles, an old FinTech friend from MX, who is now the head of growth marketing at LoanPro, someone I had not met, gosh, we were just talking about it, for quite a few years. So welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So much has changed. So first of all, please do get us up to speed. What are you doing now? What state are you living in? I know you moved. What's the latest? And what are you doing at LoanPro?
Yeah, we spent most of our career in Utah, right? COVID hit,
Mhm.
and then during that process, my wife, she said, "Hey, I want to go compete at the next level for beach volleyball." At the time, she was teaching and coaching, and I was like, "Well, what does that next step look like?" She's like, "International beach volleyball competition, the FIVB." And I was like, all right, let's go figure it out. We had two kids at the time, and we just said that's the new goal. That's the new northern star for us, that area. And all of our decisions were based off of that, being able to get her to play at that level. So we traveled the world 2021 as a family, went to 10 different countries. And at the end of it, we ended up in Florida. It just works really well with her goal of pursuing very competitive beach volleyball. And for me, I went from being the person that was in the office every single day to the remote employee, which was a huge career shift for me, for sure. But it actually worked very well. I've worked for companies that have been doing a really good job with a hybrid work environment of being able to, have high accountability, but also have some flexibility to do some side quests as well in our lives. So yeah, with Loan Pro now, just taking over. There's a lot of great momentum here when it comes to growth marketing. I think last year, if I were to sum it up in one word, is we did a lot, right? We did a lot, but this upcoming year we're going to try to be a little bit more systematic. But it was a lot of fun, just having a raw young team and trying to go from 0 to 1 on the marketing machine. And I feel like we pulled it off fairly well, thanks to all the team and everyone's endeavors that they've been doing.
Wow, that's fun. I might actually circle back and ask you about the
Yeah,
remote work question because that seems to be the topic du jour, right? You see all these institutions that says, you know what, no more remote work. You come back 5 days a week, which is
yeah,
fascinating to listen to because even before COVID, many of us were doing, 3 days in the office, 2 days off. It's a normal thing. And now all of a sudden you go, the pendulum swing all the way to the other side. And then we also hear from companies like Amazon who said, oh, wait, hang on. We did not realize we don't have enough office space. So all right, no more of
yeah.
the 5 days. We'll go back to 3 days. So it seems like we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, there's two approaches I like. I think for us on the go-to-market side, we like to be more customer facing than internal facing as much as we can, right? So go out in the wild, right? Get all that. The adage I like to say is, come together to align, go anywhere to execute. So I still pop in once a month. We do those 3 days in there are pretty intense alignment stuff, and then we go execute along the way. But I like my CMO has a great approach to it. He has a model that is on accountability and integrity on those standpoints there, right? So obviously we hope to hire people with high integrity, that ethics and all that stuff there. But what really makes or break working remote or having that luxury is accountability, right? Which, do you have clear metrics? Do you hold your employees up to those metrics, right? And that if you're accountable in what you do and you deliver on that, great, do whatever you want, just keep delivering, right? So that's the great equalizer. And I think that's what makes or breaks a lot of remote work environments. How accountable do you hold your employees? And I think that's a really good way to approach it.
I think it's tough too. Like, I'm trying to think back, dating myself, 30
Hmm.
something years ago when I started working, everyone was, we're in the office. It's the norm. We would travel for work, sales
Hmm.
meetings and whatnot. But by and large, we had a routine. We have lunch groups, we have coffee, you know, breaks, we have water cooler conversations. That was like a way to get people comfortable about the work culture, understand more about the
Yeah.
company and all that. I do feel bad, like thinking back, if I didn't have that, trying to break in. It would be hard. I don't know. Maybe it's just, a different way of working. Uh,
Yeah, it's all different, right? But there's ways to get around it and replicate it, but you have to be so intentional on everything in your digital work environment. It'll never be the same, but we're not going for the same. We're going for the future, right? Which is always this revolving, especially in hypergrowth fintech land, where things are moving so fast. Even like the industry trying to like define what it is. Like every given month could be a different way to define how you define our industry together, let alone company cultures. So
that is very true. That is very, very
yeah,
true. The one thing is constant is change, and
yeah,
speed of change. So speaking of change and comfort zone, and you going to 10 different countries, that's actually kind of cool. I know you've been working on a book called
yeah.
Wake Upward, and it's something you described on LinkedIn as a call to action and an invitation to break free from the confines of comfort zones and live a life of fulfillment. Tell us more about the book. What inspired you to write? And because thinking about writing and then going to the next step, thinking about conceptualizing, putting in an actual book, it's a huge commitment. Um, Tell us more.
Yeah, there's a long story behind it, right? But aspirationally, I've always wanted to write a book, right? And I wanted to be a writer. I'm not the best writer, I would say, right? But I've always had a desire to be a writer, which is really interesting to think about. Um, but what it really came down to, it's like, why wait? Why aspirationally wait till I'm established or have the credentials or at the very end of my career to write a memoir or a book, if you will, right? And this book is by no means a memoir, right? But I was like, well, what if I hate it? What if I spent all my whole career waiting for the day I can go write a book and I feel ready for it? Like, why wait? Let's just do it now. And the funny thing about the book is, as we were traveling the world, each chapter I was in a different country writing it. So this chapter I was in Brazil. This chapter I was in Eos, Greece, right? So each chapter I'm in a different place. One chapter I was in Turkey. It's hilarious. So as we were doing that big endeavor of trying to achieve our goals that year, my wife was trying to do a really big thing with her beach volleyball front, and I was like, "Hey, this is my year to go write a book." And I partner with the publisher that actually went bankrupt, which is kind of a hiccup there. So I actually had the book finished about a year ago, but then right before we pressed the publish button, they had a little hiccup there. So now I've been this whole last year processing and trying to do this on the side and finally getting it done. So but to answer your question about you know getting the idea and then actually moving forward with it, it was, and this is kind of what the book's about, is challenging your assumptions and just going for it, seeing if you like it or not. And your assumptions are like your assumptions of things you want to be are always going to be a little different than the actual reality of going through it. You might want to say, I want to be a writer someday, and you might actually hate it. You might actually hate writing. You might hate promoting the book. What I find is writing a book is not writing a book. Is what do you do once you've written the book, right? As you may know, right? So as you look at your assumptions of or your aspirations, right? What's stopping you from doing it besides yourself? And a lot of times it's just yourself saying, "Hey, I'm not there yet," right? But maybe you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I always find it fascinating because I will never tell people I'm a writer. I'm not a
Hmm.
writer. I don't write in the typical sense of writing. I never
Yeah.
really learned how to write. My brain works in zeros and ones. That's how my brain works. It works in flowcharts. I always tell people I write in boxes. So when
Yeah.
I conceptualize the books, it's actually flowcharts. Um, and that's how it works. And so I I always wonder what drives people to write, what drives them to
Mhm.
publish, and what is the story they're trying to tell. And it's funny you say that you have a different location for each chapter. Does that influence what you put in there? I
Well,
can't
when you
imagine being in 10 different countries in one
Yeah,
year,
and traveling with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old,
right? Oh my God.
and then it's really funny work environment because I was still working during all that too. So it actually worked out pretty nice in Europe when working
And
the
time
nine to
zone.
five. Yeah, but this is the ultimate hack though. It's like working the 9 to 5, and at the time I worked for companies in Mountain Time Zone, so
Mhm.
I worked like 5 p.m. to like 1 a.m. or so, 1 2 a.m. But then I still wake up at 8 a.m. and still get plenty of sleep and stuff. And with little kids, I don't have much of a night light anyways. So I get to play with the kids, like having your dessert first, right? Play with the kids the whole day and then start work at 5 p.m. right when the kids are all like tired and, a little bit, all, getting ready for bedtime and stuff. So shout out to my wife for taking care of her, but we were able to kind of make that work really well, which is fun. So, but in the different time zones, the influence I had there is like whenever you are traveling and getting exposure to culture, right? Like the one thing I learned from it is there's so much more hope for humanity out there. Like awesome people just like going out of their way. They didn't need to. Like in Turkey, this taxi driver for free drove us around, gave us insider scoop, would refuse the tip, right? Type of thing, right? So then, as I'm writing about like challenging your assumptions, right, and you think a taxi driver would try to rip you off, but the guy's giving you a huge, great, time there, right? It definitely has a huge influence as you're exposing your stuff and really reframing how you view in the world. So yeah, total influence there for sure.
Wow. I wish I were a fly on the wall. I would have loved to see that. I mean, because we travel for work, right?
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
typically it's like the 3 days, 5 day max. You go and you do what you need to do, you get out. You don't really get the chance to spend enough time there to actually talk to people. So that must be so much fun. Um, so related to that, thinking about work culture, you talk about different time zone. I still struggle with that. I think my body is on permanent jet lag. Um,
yep,
we work in an ecosystem, right? FinTech startups. It's like go, 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 always on the
hmm,
go, is
yes,
intense. But then when you're writing, you talk about, family time. You're talking about spending time with kids. You talk about going to 1 and 0, doing a whole lot of stuff. And then there's the other side, which is we still have a life. We need to find balance.
yeah,
For the lack of a better word, how do you balance that between, being an authentic self, pushing boundaries versus taking
yeah.
care of your other side?
Phenomenal question. This is actually a major theme of my book where
Okay.
we go through the short answer is a lot of people have goals, right? But not enough people have the same level of emphasis on their values, right? So for New Year's, this is coming out in January. We're all thinking through New Year's resolutions, right? They're usually around some goal. But how many of us have set values for this upcoming year that we want to adhere by? So your values that you live by are the playing field that your goals need to live in. Because as soon as your goals start to go outside or intersect with your value kind of limit, that's where you can really start having that friction in your life, right? And there's people I know in fintech, right, that are totally doing the conference grind, right, going to back to back to back, all that stuff, right? Too many of us, unfortunately, right? But they have families, they have stuff, but like their families and their spouses are bought in on what they're trying to do, and the Simon Sinek, right, the infinite game, the causes that we're furthering, right, that justify why they're spending so much more time on the road. Whereas for me, I spend a little less time. They try to pull me into conferences like when they really need me to, but I try to be the one behind the desk, right, more often than not. But for me, I try to have a little more family time in my life, a little more because that's a bigger value to me in a sense. But not saying that one value is different. That I don't judge other people because they have different set. But as long as you're intentional and like, hey, for these next 3 years, I'm going to be a CMO at this fintech, and I'm going to go for it. As long as you and your ecosystem around you, your family or your kind of core group that you hang out with, right, are really aligned with that value, you're in a great place. But it's those people that are just on autopilot, going trying to get these goals, but they're not looking at their values. You're going to get lost really quick. Or those are what I call the sleepers, right? Those are the people that are sleeping, and then you're gonna have that moment where you wake up and whoa, where am I going in life right now? You have no sense of direction. Like when you wake up, especially even wake up when you're traveling, you have no idea where you are. You kind of like freak out for a second. That's exactly what this book is for. Those people that are like, hey, I'm in a hotel. I have no idea where I am. And what do I do? Right. And how do we get those values set up, establish your goal trajectory, and then that's how you operate. You just make sure you stay in bounds, right? Don't go out of bounds is the name of the
Well,
game.
that is, I Actually, I think this will be the perfect episode for New Year, as we all try to set goals. This is the time when people hit the gym, right? This
Yeah.
is the time we see the most people running on the street and trying to be good at least for a month. Um, that is fascinating. I think I think our ecosystem value autopilot. Just go, 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 and then think
Mhm.
later. This is a different way of looking at it. So looking back at what you've done, right? Traveling with the family, changing jobs, looking at life with a different light than quite a few of us do. What have you learned and what have you unlearned? Unlearning is a new term I've learned this year. It's shedding your old habits and so that you can gain new skills. If you were to be able to go back in time, let's say I don't know, when you were a 22-year-old, what would you tell
Yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. I would tell myself to read Bernie Brown sooner. Daring Greatly is a phenomenal book. I love that. But there's a concept there of belonging, right? Especially earlier in your career, you got to fit in, right? Fit into the culture, fit into the room, right? Fit into your dynamic, all that stuff. But there's actually another phenomenon. I'm a big book person. I'll keep knocking out book all the time here, right? But no, you are worthy to belong as you are, instead of trying to be this aspirational person that you think you're going to be or trying to become. Right? Come as you are. Belonging is the biggest part, and be unapologetic about who you are. Right? I mean, don't be rude about it, right? But at the same time, if I can come in as myself and not try to pretend to be someone else. Again, early people in the company trying to fit in, trying to grow. Hey, I see this person be successful and be more like them. That's great, right? But at the same time, that sense of belonging for me, I think, is the most important skill set to realize and to come. Because, like for any job interview, I usually tell people, hey, when I interview them, hey, be yourself. Because if you're anyone but yourself, if you sell me on someone who you're not, you're going to have to be that person for a long time, right? But just come in as yourself, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, great. But I want to see you, right? Or when I interview, it's I want to be myself. If they don't like me, that's fine. I'll find someone who does like me, right?
I can relate to that. I always start my conversation when I meet someone. I say I'm not a banker, so don't hold that against me. I won't try to pretend to be one. Um, but but
Nice.
yeah, I am who I am. But it takes time, I think, to get to that point, right? Because I think culturally we always, at least for myself, I can say we're always being taught that we need to fit in, right? Keep your
Yep.
heads down, do work, and fit in, and don't create trouble. Don't draw attention, and
Mhm.
be everyone else. So that's what we've always been told for a long time, and then
Yep.
realizing, wait a minute, you can have the freedom to do something else, and that's
Yeah.
that's something else. It's different.
100%. And just so much wasted time on just that fit in moment, right? Like, oh, I'm trying to just you're a circle, but you need to be a square, right? How do you mold yourself? Almost like that chameleon syndrome, or there's also imposter syndrome, all these different kind of syndromes out there, right? But like when you really think about it, um, it provides a lot more freshness, especially like when you meet with like executives or fintech leaders at conferences or whatnot, right? They are so cause driven, right? So, and that's probably the easiest way I recommend to people. Like, how do you be yourself? Like, recognize what causes you really support, right? Are you just one of those people that want to, MX had such a great one, enable the world to be financially strong. Like that was everything for us, right? And that's the cause we're further vehicles that we choose to jump into and further ourselves, right? And if you're so cause driven behind your decisions and you find these just causes, and fintech is full of them, which I love about it, right? Or if you talk to an executive, what cause are you trying to further with your company, right? That's where you can be a lot more yourself because there is that mobility, I guess is the word to go after, right? Of you're trying to further something, and I think that's where you can be a lot more authentic in that.
So talking about causes,
Mhm.
let's end with this. We live in a world where, like you say, there are many causes, many drivers behind the causes. And we also work in an industry that loves to not change.
Yeah.
There's comfort in status quo. How do you see that dynamics play out? Especially, you've been in the industry for quite a while. You're on the other end that's trying to drive change, right?
Mhm.
Always curious to hear, from your perspective, how do you think things going to be like in a few years? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but assume you do. And I'll hold you to
Yeah.
it.
The again, the what I found, I guess I've been in this fintech industry for like 7 years now, almost eight
That makes
years.
you
It's
a
crazy.
veteran. Hmm.
I'll take it. I'll take it. And before that, I was at a company called Qualtrics that
Hmm.
really claimed the experience economy and experience management stuff like that. We definitely weren't solely in the banks and credit unions and fintechs, but that was definitely the financial services sector, as we call it, was a big part of the business there. So I guess my whole career I've had some part of this industry, but um, you know and again, this is someone coming from a go-to-market standpoint of like my job is to drive change in organizations and that priority and stuff. And there's it's kind of a joke I like to say. It's like the evolution of banking versus banking transformation, right? Evolution can be correlated to like think like dinosaurs, like through generations or like different hiring teams, right? They bring in a team, they go for a couple of years, and then that next generation of team comes in, they go for a couple of years, and then slowly through evolution they can get to where they need to be, right, from different hiring and firing and stuff. Or there's that transformation which breaks that evolutionary track, right, and then that's where that cause comes in to sustain the teams, right. So I would say, again, for my armchair analysis here, which just from observations, right, it's how do you go from hire a team for 3 years, how long can you keep them, right? And then bring in the next crew and see how far you can go there. Or how can you break that and find that transformative cause that helps you move quicker, that you all can get behind, right? And it's not easy to solve. I'm not saying there's here's the answer to solve for that, but I think that mindset can help break that chain of evolution to transformation. So I don't know if you ever heard of that approach before, but that's kind of one I've always kind of formulated. Still validating a little bit here. It's not perfect, but it's kind of where I observe it going.
Yeah, I think we often joke that, especially with an innovation team, the shelf life is 3 years. You're spot on.
Yeah,
3 years to change screw. Nope, not working. Let's pick someone else. 3 years. Oh, you've done. Next
yeah,
one. I think that's part of the challenge, right? Because I, change is hard. Let's be real. Change
yeah,
is hard, but you also need to be able to set goals and set your teams for success. Otherwise, you just keep changing the crew and you're not really changing anything.
yeah,
But new year,
yeah. And
new
I've
hope.
Yeah, I mean, for my career, I've been at three companies in 10 years, right? So my first company I was there for about 5 years, and then I was at MX for about four to 5 years as well, and then LoanPro I just finished my first year. So it's interesting being part of like being like a millennial but having long tenure as a millennial in companies, and these companies I've worked are all these hyper growth, fast mover companies and stuff, and I think it really goes down to like how bought in the company is on stuff, but they're all really small companies. They all are like 200 employees that grow up to 1,000 employee companies, right? Or kind of fluctuate up and down. So can't really speak towards the big size, companies, but when it comes to the hyper growth companies, that's really where I feel like if you can get really all in on it, there's a lot of awesome growth potential in there.
Yep. So new year of hope, should we say?
Yep, yep, hopeful. Yep.
All right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me, Bryce. And look forward to seeing your book in the market.
Yes. Yes, we're really excited about it. You can find it on Amazon, Wake Upward. And if you buy a book, reach out. I'd love to talk to you on LinkedIn.
That's
Thanks.
awesome. We'll put the link on the show notes as well. And for the rest of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of One Vision, the FinTech Fuse. We'll talk to you all next week.